The ideas expressed in the following presentations are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of ACI or its committees. ACI web sessions are recorded at ACI conventions or other concrete industry events and will be made available for viewing free of charge for 1 week. Thereafter, they will be archived on the ACI website or added to ACI's online CEU program, depending on their content.
So our final presenter is Tracy Marcotte, and Tracy is going to talk about the possibility of unifying 318 and 562 into one overall code. Tracy.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit. We started with talking about it's the contractor's fault. We started talking about how, well, it's the filthy designer's fault. Then we started to say, well, we're not teaching anybody to do anything properly. We didn't pick on actually any sort of education or certification program for contractors, but you can just assume that's in there too. But in reality, I'm probably going to pick on ACI a little bit because this is just intended to be a provocative statement. You guys are clearly the most impressive people in all the institute to show up here at 9:15 when you could be outside having fun in Vegas. But here we are. What I'd like to give you, I'd like to plant an image in your mind. This is really about creating a lifetime commitment when you create a structure. It's not unlike having a baby. You say, I'm going to carry the baby. I'm going to take care of it the way 318 says. I'm going to take care of it. And then the day it's born, if you look at the way we're set up right now, because 562 doesn't really exist, you're just throwing it out into the wild. If you don't have a plan for your baby for the future, like if you don't think of it as, before it's born and then after it's born, what happens after, you're kind of missing most of its life. The actual construction process is just a small fraction of the total lifetime of the structure. We can maintain things for a long time. Now, all of you seem really calm and put together because I assumed everyone would be freaking out about trying to put what is considered the premier workhorse of the ACI world, the 318, and this new upstart 562 together. But I'd like to consider this was actually an innovative piece of artwork. This is one of the first times that an artist chose to reflect their emotions in a piece. Like before, everything was pretty paintings, people in lovely outfits, flowers. And then this guy came along, Edward Wunsch. And even better than saying, why would we want to pair 318 with 562? I've actually heard 562 people who are obviously fiercely proud say, ugh, why would we lash ourselves to 318? We're too busy being cool and innovative. But let's just talk about it. So one of the things that 318 has going for it, one of the things about 318 that's going, it's well established. It's 100 years old, basically. It goes through these periodic updates. It's well regarded within the code cycles. Keith was talking about the International Building Code, which is really the US. And it has a broad range of environmental conditions. If you think about, okay, we've got the body of the US here, but you've got Alaska. That's some serious snow load, cold temperatures. Then you have Hawaii here. That's a hot, humid, chloride environment, totally marine. This is marine, but it's cold, so it's not as bad. We've got all of these other states. We've got, hot, humid, dry, humid right there in Texas, and then you go up to Montana, and, the rest is history. You've got all of these things. The intent of 318 is to provide a minimum standard for life safety. It adds some things in like serviceability, and it has a certain amount of what I'm trying not to express disdain. I'll call it prescriptive durability. Like, I somehow want to have my structure last for 100 years, but I'm going to tell you that's all in the water-cement ratio. But just park that for a second. However, it's an amazing American success story. I don't know how many of you realize how far it goes globally. It's used by over 40+ countries and jurisdictions worldwide. It has been pointed out to me that we don't know why there is a little red pin up in Canada. But just take that one out. It's still 40+ countries or jurisdictions. This is actually a map that's at ACI World Headquarters in Farmington Hills. And lovely place, but clearly someone went a little crazy with the pins. Yeah, maybe Saskatchewan went rogue. Anyway, ACI 562, as you just heard from Keith, is basically the fresh-faced ingenue, the new kid on the block. You know, it's been trying for several years now to get adopted, but by any new fresh thing, people are immediately suspicious. It's been very slow and very frustrating because you spend all this time in these rooms and you're trying to create something that's important and will change the industry, and then the politics of it, the actual practicalities of it, where people say, well, this is new, we have to vet this, we can't just take everything that we see that comes along. No one necessarily sees it the way we do. Keith's already listed how many places. We're in bits and pieces, and Bangladesh. That's amazing. So, and fundamentally, if you wanted to compare the two codes, the way I look at it, 562 is completely different from 318 in its framework because it can't rely just on prescriptive requirements. You know, you have to inquire the structure, you have to look at the restrictions. Like sometimes things were actually executed poorly because there was some pre-existing condition that, you know, the engineer didn't account for, or, you know, the forms were set in the wrong place or something, and people just wanted to have a good day and go home and they didn't fix it. It also has to be flexible to adapt to a range of members, structures, quality of concrete, and tolerances. You know, once a structure is made and it's occupied, you have to think about, you know, the fire resistance. You have to think about, you know, people are probably in the building while you're executing your repair program. You have to think about how will this building be used safely at the same time, you know, I'm jackhammering in another room. The most important thing is, and I'm not one of these evil historic preservationists that Keith talks about, but I love historic preservation. I think it kind of marries well with my material science and my just love of repair. What it does is it allows older building codes to be used as a basis of design. So what it means is we have a beautiful structure from, say, 1920s. Maybe it's not a parking deck, but it's something that it's an older building. It had different requirements at the time of construction. It's performing as intended. We should be allowed to open our eyes and say, you know what, let's not apply the modern code all the time to existing structures if they're doing perfectly well and there isn't a change of use. Change of use is things like, this used to be just sort of a bedroom or a meeting area, and now suddenly we're putting high density storage or a library system with a lot bigger loads. 562 has a lot of 318 expertise in it, but the other important thing is 562 sees itself as a flexible framework. We want the other expertise of other committees within the Institute. Larry brought up the idea that maybe as many as 1/3 of ACI committees actually have some relationship to repair and rehabilitation. The only thing is 1/3 of committees in this institute do not provide standards in mandatory language that are convenient to use in a code. So, you know, our pickings are slim when it comes to actually trying to put in new code provisions. So, if you're saying to yourself that ACI wants to be the best in the world, or if you're even saying we want to have a functional coordinated building code, maybe it might be wise to look at other other examples over the world of other international building codes. Two others come to mind. One is the FIB Model Code 2010, and then the Eurocodes system. So, having a quick look at the FIB Model Code 2010, this is a code which is created by experts for experts with deep technical knowledge, and it's not actually really written in a way that you could open it and actually do something. Like, you couldn't hand it to a code official and say, this is how we're doing this structure, my design complies with this. But at the same time, it is intended to serve as the basis for future codes for concrete structures and an ability to vet and present new developments. It's a way to incorporate new ideas and innovation. My favorite thing about it, though, much like all of us that come to ACI, it took 10 years to actually create this code by hundreds, if not thousands, I just haven't counted all the names and the pages, of national experts. There are many ACIers there. It's all of this free labor, the best and the brightest, going into creating this code. I'm going to spare you the punchline, but we don't actually reference this code when we're looking at other codes within the Institute. Some of the things that are inside it, as core principles, it actually has things like, in the same sentence, performance requirements for serviceability, structural safety, service life, and reliability. That's just a bridge that ACI 318 can't cross. It's something that, because 318 hasn't done it, it means that 562 doesn't automatically have it, but we need it. You can't talk about an existing structure and talk about a repair and then not think about how long will it last? What am I paying for if I invest in my structure? Other general principles, of course, it's right at the base, section 3, sustainability. We have a few words in 318 about sustainability. Repairing and maintaining, extending the service life of your structures is an inherently sustainable practice. Every time you demolish something when it didn't need to be demolished, and could have been repaired or updated, it's a waste of your investment. The other thing is in section 7 for design, you'll note that structural serviceability, durability, robustness, and sustainability, they all have kind of equal footing. It's not just, oh, we're only cared about the structure. You have to remember, until 1971, ACI 318 just thought concrete was a structural material. It didn't really worry about whether it lasted. It thought if you actually made it so that it complied with its structural requirements, everything would take care of itself. But we know, everyone knows from in this room that it's the rare occasion, not Tarek's problems or maybe Chuck's problems. But a lot of problems are because the durability requirements, the marine exposure, the sulfate in the soil, the carbonate, the CO2 in the air eventually created enough carbonation-induced corrosion. And then finally, right in section 9 of this code, conservation, that's the European way of talking about repair and maintenance. So where I wanted to say, this work on this FIB Model Code 2010 is actually continuing. The next one will be in 2020. It's continuing to build and strengthen, and yet as an institute, I don't feel that we're sending experts, but at the same time, we're not bringing that information home. Flipping the switch a little bit to explain why that's so important and what the power of actually paying attention to FIB could actually be, you have to look at the Eurocodes. These are multi-part umbrella codes which take over national codes. If you're in Europe, you have a Eurocode. You're allowed to take this master document and tailor it for your country in certain key provisions. They have both prescriptive conditions like water cement ratio, slump, air content, things like that, but they also allow for performance-oriented methods. Like if I wanted to be a little more sophisticated about how I actually design something. And also they require that durability provisions are tied into the structural design, and they consider the design service life. Another thing that they do that's different from 318 is that they reference standards from other expert committees for durability, service life, et cetera. So if you actually look at this, not the multi-part umbrella code part, but these bottom 3 points, this is kind of where 562 has landed, in terms of how do we get the most in a code and make sure that it's as functional as possible. So the real power in how this approach that the Eurocodes have adopted is they almost have what looks like a sort of a recycling model. They have their dominant Eurocodes at the top. Their Eurocode is timed also with the knowledge base that's developed in the FIB model code. If they need a standard, they'll go and look to the European standards, or they'll look to the ISO standards to plug in so that, if I need steel to be a certain composition or a certain strength, it gets just plugged right into a circle. And then if they need special derivative documents like the FIB service life prediction model, that gets plugged into the code and still gets into this cycle. So why should ACI innovate or consider anything else that anyone else in the world does? Why not just be ourselves and move forward and talk about international building codes, World Series, what was that? Also the regional football competition we call the Super Bowl. So anyway, so I see World Series of Poker. So I see threats and opportunities. Real threats. Global codes and standard bodies are typically more integrated and include more provisions for design, service life, sustainability, durability design, and it depends upon the region. I've heard it today, I heard it last year, I hear it every time I come to ACI. People will say, you know what, if I want to make a long service life structure here in the US, we don't use 318, we have to go outside the US. We have to pull in other things. We're allowed to pull in the model code. We'll make it look like it complies with 318, but in reality, we had to use the model code. As I see the model code strengthen, the longer we ignore this existing knowledge base, it just kind of puts the gap in in the excellence of 318 and 562 farther away. ACI is sharing its experts, but it seems like a one-way street. The opportunity is 318 could easily strengthen itself just by simply referencing 562. You have the new construction building code, and then it says, by the way, for structures and service, head on over to 562. It doesn't. Most people don't want to. That's a variety of reasons. There's reasons, I don't understand them, but the other thing that's happening is 562 already understands that we're struggling with understanding and documenting durability design that works best with ACI codes and standards as a systemic practice. And another major opportunity is that 318 lacks thoughtful durability provisions and no mention of service life. So if you actually, 318 actually let 562 in, you could actually summon this. We're trying to do durability a little bit better. Let 318 pull us in. So just to kind of like put this all a different way, like after all this verbiage, this is a model, because I love flowcharts. This is a model of what the system actually looks like today. We have ASTM providing our standards. We have ACI 318 at the top for new buildings. We send experts to the FIB model code, which then is interfaced with the service life prediction people. We send people also for 318 to ISO standards. 562 sends people to the ISO standards, and 318 provides information to 562. If you look at all these arrows, there's too many one-way interactions, and then it's also difficult. We're investing in things like the ISO standards, but it's very difficult to pull those things back into the ACI model because we don't necessarily trust things that we can't control. There's got to be a way to ACI needs to grow this stuff at home because otherwise then we'll feel that it's a complete cohesive document in compliance with the excellence that we've experienced in the past. So what we're doing right now is we've empowered ACI 201, the Durability Committee, and ACI 365, the Service Life Prediction Committee, to start growing their own standards that could actually be, it would be written in mandatory language that then 562 could use to strengthen its document and enhance those provisions. We think this is a revolutionary idea. We're not necessarily interested in taking their information and stripping it out and putting it into 562. We want to make sure that they're continue to be stimulated. Right now they have these fantastic guides. It took ACI 201 something like 14 years to create a 150-page guide to durable concrete. But you got to weaponize it. You got to make it so that people need to read it. But if we took this one step further and we sort of took our cues from the Eurocode model, we might actually say, you know what if we actually treated 318, 562, and any other comers as a family of documents, an operational system put out by ACI? If we actually accepted that some of this innovative work is happening at the model code and put it into our circle, or I guess our recycling triangle, just like the European system, not because we just want to be Europeans. And then we made sure that not just the service life standard or the durability standard, that we actually said, what else do we need? Do we need sustainability standards? What else can we decide is important to us and implant it in the code? So doing this just takes us back to our original vision and mission within ACI. We're committed to the pursuit of excellence through world-class products, innovative processes, and empowered employees from a position of leadership. It doesn't feel that we're there today, but I think any good leader has a certain amount of self-reflection and understands, hey, I'm a collaborator. I like to compete within myself. We have the horsepower. We have the best people. This is something that's this is absolutely achievable, and we can catch up actually quite quickly, like within a decade. We also, if you go back to that slide where we had all the pins plus Bangladesh, ACI has a commitment, sphere of influence, and audience to achieve global impact. We literally make the world better. We make safer structures. When you think about extreme events, climate change, rising water, concrete's one of those materials that can handle it. So we should just keep innovating. And with that, I'm going to say thanks, especially for staying all the way to the end. So thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, we've had 5 presentations, 5 different perspectives. Now it's the time for people to ask questions, and let's have some thoughtful discussion. Do you want to can we get all of the speakers up? Tarek? And questions? There's got to be something.
Everything is so clear.
Ali?